Linda has already given you a little bit of introduction of TAKE2. Amit and I co-created it. We've done seven batches of it over the last 3.5 years, and it's a program for helping people make uh, transformations in their lives, in the work, and most important of all, when Amit and I started this venture, we were very much tuned into the fact saying there are so many challenges and issues to solve around us, whether in organizations, society, uh, in families, and how are we going to make this change happen? It seems so overwhelming at times, especially the part of the world that we live in. And if anything, COVID exposed a lot of that. Uh, One of the key reasons, besides many others that were personal to us, that made us get into Take-Two and helping create more change makers, so to say. Um and so from that perspective, I happen to know Mayank, who's a good friend, and the way he responded to it, to some of the change making that he has done and his team has done, and it was great to hear him. And interestingly, he used to call me during those times at the end of the day, and share some of his troubles with that. So that really intrigued me, that what the change maker goes through. So I saw it from the wings, or from the backstage, if I may call it, while he was on the front stage, and it's always remains a source of inspiration even today for me. So when we were putting together Connects platform, which is a platform that take tours and non-take tours come to talk about change making and change makers, I said, "Would you like to share your story?" And he gracefully agreed, and pulled in Sonali and Ankush as well. So Sonali, thank you for agreeing to do this.
Thank you so much once again for inviting us. It's totally as Mayank said. We never thought of sharing the story post achieving what we did with MTSN. In fact, I don't think we expected to achieve how much we did. We just did it at the moment.
MTSN was set up, as I mentioned, by a group of like-minded individuals who were coming with the idea to jump right into action and contribute as much. The single focus agenda for all of us who came together was to support the migrant crisis. While we started with pushing our efforts to send people home, it diversified into multiple things. The primary focus was to get people home, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. We followed primarily a two-pronged strategy. One was augmenting whatever was exactly happening on the ground, not trying to reinvent the wheel, not trying to duplicate, but support them as much as possible. And I think one thing that I would want to take credit for, and Sonali, I'm sure you would agree, is we tried to streamline whatever was happening. And we did that by creating a single source helpline to route all requests of food, requests of ration, requests of transport, health related concerns, requests around financial support. And I think that is where a lot of our effort lied. While doing this process, what we were also able to achieve, or what aided this process, was just mobilization of about 100 plus volunteers, partnering with over 50 plus network partners on the field for donations, for getting food, for mental health support. And I think we were able to directly impact about 20,000 plus migrants, getting them home. And we were also able to raise about 10 lakh for helping them, say, get home, arrange buses, transports, etc. And we also, I would just highlight, we also kind of arranged for a flight as well. But that's pretty much I would want to share at this point in time about what MTSN was. Sonali, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I think that was a very good description, Mayank. So when we started MTSN, so MTSN was not at all about the people who were involved in facilitating the movement of migrants back home. It was the sole focus was you make make things as easier as possible, like hack away at problems one at a time as much as we could, um, and streamlining, mobilizing the power of people, mobilizing the power of our contacts, mobilizing how many people we were in a network with. Uh, we basically just asked people, and I think the main power lied in people saying yes, in coming together and acting solely, not thinking about what it adds to their lives, but thinking about how do you help fellow citizens or fellow human beings on the face of the earth with whatever problems they are facing at the moment. So you basically had to strip it down to bare basics and ask them the question of what was needed, and then you take it from there. And it was, as Mayank pointed out, it was like a health call center type of a model where we kind of thought what is the best way that people can reach us to ask for support, which we can then share with people who can actually provide. So we created a network, a helpline. We put forward a call to ask for internships, and more than 100 volunteers, school children, and across all ages, actually, single mothers working from home, everybody. In fact, some migrant workers themselves came back and asked that if they could be part of MTSN after they went home. So it was a helpline which people can reach to, and then we trained the volunteers who were manning the helplines. We also had mentors come and join us, helping with the training process, more experienced people who could kind of take on some of the work of mobilizing and streamlining this whole activity.
Thank you, Sonali. Wow, that the scale of it and the complexity of it itself is something that boggles my mind to hear it like that. You also mentioned partners, 50 partners. So, could you, Sonali, say who were the partners? What when we say partners, who do you mean?
Yeah, Mayank can talk a little bit more about that. I can give you a little initial description of this. So we did create a WhatsApp group. So because a lot of things in India run through WhatsApp, and we decided to mobilize that power. Instead of using it for false information, you use it for actually doing something productive. So we basically we reached out to people we knew, NGOs working on the ground. I knew a lot of other people who were working individually on the ground, providing food, providing support, who wanted to do things, and they were well situated with manpower or with shelter opportunities. They were situated at different parts of India. So we created a WhatsApp group, added all of them, one person from each organization into that group, and then we pushed a lot of the requests we got. Mayank was in charge of all the Excel sheets and making sure that we have actually a streamlined platform. What are the options that we should be putting in the platform? And every day we went about optimizing this platform. We thought about, okay, how do we divide it? We should be dividing it for food requests, shelter requests. We have to make a list of all the people who wanted to go from a certain point A to certain point B. And then we had to give this information back to the officials who could actually arrange a train for them to go from point A to point B. Now, there were many different obstacles that we faced from point A to point B, and that's where our partners came in to help us. They were situated all over India. And as soon as you give one phone call request to one particular partner in that, or you put it on the WhatsApp group, people took it up. And we basically checked it off saying that this person has taken up this particular responsibility, put their name.
I think the last mile work, say providing food at stations, providing last mile connectivity, transports. There were governments which were trying to get trains running from point A to point B. We were partnering with them as well. There were CSR foundations, philanthropies that were trying to figure out where can we put in funds so that it gets to people who are actually in need. We partnered with them. There were partner organizations who were doing similar kind of work that we were doing, like creating a platform. So there was Coast India, for example, that created a platform, used technology to kind of gather all requests and see. We partnered with them to see if we are not. So we also trying to ensure that we are not duplicating requests. And if somebody's taken up a request of a certain migrant worker or a family or a group of people, it shouldn't people shouldn't be spending a lot of time duplicating effort. And I think the idea was just very plain and simple. The entire focus was on just one thing, to get people home. Happen as the migrant crisis started to unfold is we started to take requests very individually. Somebody posting, okay, this is a help, and if somebody's has worked in this area before, know somebody, can we mobilize the resources or help and support? Slowly, this picked up real pace, and we started to get requests like every 5-10 minutes, and people started forwarding requests that they had from other groups. And how I would say MTSN came about was through some of these things where we said, okay, this is a group of people trying to do this. Can we reach out? Can we just expand? Can we ask more people to join in? We are trying to do effort in our own way, and which is great, but can we multiply this effort? And what we did was just ask people for help, no expectations attached. And I think I will just emphasize on that, no expectations attached, because then it wasn't disappointing. We were just happy with whoever came on board. Instead of assuming the default to be no, we just went out and asked people, will you be willing to help? And for example, I'm also part of the Teach for India family. And so I put that out in a lot of groups that I'm part of, called off some people that I thought were really working in this area, were keen on working in this area. And I think to my surprise, 90% of people I reached out to said yes. 10% who could not devote time were very keen on, say, sharing financial resources, sharing some kind of support. So support, I think, for me came in from all quarters, and also helped me. And everybody contributed, I think, with this very selfless sort of an approach, not really thinking what is it in for me, but very focused on trying to solve the challenge at hand, which is getting people back home.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I can add to that story. So basically what happened was, I think all of us were individually thinking of doing something in our individual capacities before we actually started MTSN. When the country went into lockdown with just a few hours notice, and I was discussing this with my father at home, and because he had experience working in the cooperative side on the field, working with migrant workers quite a lot of time. He was also very worried, and like we were just talking about this as like, fellow citizens feeling going through a very harassing phase of life. Now I knew Ankush from my time at University of Sussex, where I finished my PhD. He was doing his master's, and basically I saw his Google form where I think Mayank and Ankush were just starting off asking volunteers. Gave him a call, came on board, and then we started brainstorming on how do we actually put a structure. We divided up the number of volunteers, interns calls that we got from people. The whole process, the first step was we started interviewing the interns who had applied to us. The interview process just went simply like, what is your reason to want to do this internship with us? What do you hope to take away from it? How many number of hours can you give into it? Do you have a phone or a laptop or internet connection? Because everyone was working from all parts of India. We also tried to capture how many languages people spoke and what languages were they most comfortable with, because we anticipated that a lot of different migrant workers would be coming from different parts of India, and we wouldn't have the capability of translating all the languages ourselves. Then we went about basically putting up, making sure that we have all the information in a proper way. Now, the next step was we got the volunteers, and we figured out that among the three of us, training 100 volunteers is going to be a very tough job. And so actually, I reached out to 5 of my personal contacts from my school time and from ISER Kolkata, where I did my master's. And to my surprise, all of them said yes, like on the spot. Aman, Maya, Ravi, Simli, some of them were doing their bachelor's. They were actually writing their master's thesis at that time. So it was a very stressful time for them as well. Maya was a flight attendant who had basically, did not have a lot of flight opportunities when when this lockdown was happening. And she really wanted to make a change. Aman was pregnant with her baby, which I did not know at the time. And all of them just jumped in. They literally jumped in feet first. And every day we would have WhatsApp calls. And these 5 people basically set up, took charge of a batch of volunteers each. We would support them. We would train them, give them certain this is how you can do this stuff. We would problem solve for them if there were problems, and they took responsibility of a certain batch of volunteers, and they set about making their own groups work. Like there was the request taking group who would get on the helpline, the phone lines, and they came up with a process of how do we take the request more efficiently, and how do we make sure that we transfer it over to the processing group, who would then make sure that we actually finish the processing job and make sure that we are not letting people wait for a response for more than 4 hours. We had a cutoff of the number of hours that we would try and close a case by. So there were open cases, and then we closed off all the cases as fast as possible. We had another group of team of volunteers who would then man the WhatsApp group network, who would see, okay, this case has not been closed for more than 3 hours. So now we are going to mobilize the power of our network. We are going to put this into the broader MTSN network, which is throughout of India. And then somebody picked up from there. One of the volunteers, who were mostly school children, actually, they basically kept track of who is doing what. People basically got their own networks, got them to translate messages in languages that did not understand. They talked among each other, made sure that people were supported. It was another big thing I think I just want to raise up is the mental health side of things. Everybody was suffering. The migrant workers were suffering the most, but the school students who were taking 6 hours out of their time every single day to be on the helpline, and obviously they were seeing a different side of India. They were getting exposed to quite a lot of mental health challenges that the migrant workers were facing, and because they were their fellow citizens, it's just very normal that they were also having they were basically, empathy was high at this point, and they were taking on all those challenges in their own heads, and they were trying to make sure that everybody, because all the cases were like, do it right away, because all of them were urgent, and it wasn't easy to figure out how do you prioritize which case first. And so another thing we tried to do is the mentors again tried to support their volunteers to understand that they're not having mental breakdowns. The mentors needed support from us in turn to make sure that they were also, not having mental breakdowns. You might think that you're that kind of a citizen, but I think at the end of the day, all of us, when we see someone who's, who is in need, and we actually think that, oh, this person has given me a call and they might know how to do things. I think it's just power of collective. I don't think any of us individually could have done much. I started off donating a little bit because I could. That was obviously some privilege that I could donate something and think that, okay, I've done something. But then I thought, okay, I've really not done anything. And then when I saw that Ankush and Mayank are there with the three of us, it seemed a little bit more easier than doing it myself.
I think the biggest need, at least and maybe transport, I would not put as the biggest need. The biggest need for them was a trustworthy source of information, because there was so much information floating around WhatsApp, and because there was an entire chain reaction. And possibly I'll give an example here very briefly. So if I were to go from Kota in Rajasthan to for example, Dhanbad in Jharkhand, because I work in Kota as a migrant laborer and my home is in Dhanbad, I have to go from Kota to Jaipur, take a bus because there's no train there, Kota to Jaipur on a bus or a private vehicle arranged by someone. Then from Jaipur, the train will take me from Jaipur to Ranchi. And from Ranchi to again Dhanbad, I have to take another transport. And all of these coordination points where information was very, very critical. Where do I stay? Where do I eat food? Is the train on time? Is the train getting cancelled? Will I get robbed of my belongings? Will the landlord let me go? All of these things need to be coordinated. So I think the biggest need was for somebody they could trust while they were in the process of migrating from one place to another.
So one of the things about achievement motivation, and in Take2 that we talked about, is that change makers and people who are driven by achievement motivation take unprecedented levels of risk. And as just Linda said, right? I mean, many, the billions of us, and yet only a few hundred, a few thousands took on like this, and the two of you are here. What made you, and I'm sure your own personal safety, your own jobs were being re-engineered at the same time. You had your own challenges as, protecting yourself and struggling with what to trust yourself, right? So what made you take on this? I'd like to hear from both of you, and it may be very different or same, I don't know, but what made you take on this level of risk?
For me, I don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about what is a better future for humanity. It's like a question that I talk about every day. And I think at some privilege levels, it is a very empty question unless you do something about it. Um, and how you start doing it, it's just, I mean, we all know it. We have heard the same phrase over and over again. Charity starts at home. Um, you I was talking to my father right away after we saw this on TV, that this is happening and this is what is going to happen. It was easily predicted. It wasn't a happy prediction to be making. And for me, it was, can I do something? What is the easiest thing I can do right now? Start small. Take one step. Do not try and think of like this is the end point. Take just one step. My one step was, let's call up Ankush and Mayank, because I saw their Google form, and ask them what they need support with. I thought it was already set up. And then I realized they are looking for partners to set it up. And then it was for me to think about, okay, I have a 8 hours, 9 hours everyday job. Now, how do I time manage so that I actually spend around 12 hours on this as well? Um, so I think that those were the small first steps. How much money can I put in at this point to donate to a few things? Looking at my finances, just time management was the first step for me. And secondly, it was just like, if I was in that situation, I would want somebody to help me out, because you can understand there were students who were stuck without food, without a place, without a roof to stay in, a safe place. And being a woman who has traveled to different parts of the world, you're always unsafe. You understand the feeling of being unsafe, whether it is the lack of food, the lack of water, the lack of safety, the lack of a roof, or the lack of people who understand or take your identity seriously and think about giving you a safe space. You understand the feeling of being unsafe, and that is not fun at various different levels. I'm just saying not fun very lightly. And I think my main motivation is nobody should be at risk if they can be helped.
Thank you, Sonali. I really like that the very first thing you said, the privilege, it's an empty promise if you don't live it. So just makes me aware of my own empty promises right now.
We all
Maya.
have them.
So I think in some ways, some similar thoughts in terms of just looking at my privileges, what possibly I can do. How it possibly triggered was a little different for me, because as I mentioned, the groups that I was part of, specifically the Prime Minister's Fellows groups, we were trying to help people, and we were trying to post requests from our own networks to say, okay, if you're in Chhattisgarh, can you help this person? If you are in Chennai, can you help this person? And eventually it started to trigger a point where we said, okay, we're trying to help X, Y, and Z. Can we organize this a little better? But the question was, who will organize it? And Ankush and I and a couple of others got on a call and said, can we mobilize more people? Because this organization will require effort. And then the question was, okay, ho payega ye? Will it be possible with our own jobs? And I don't know, when I look back, it gives me goosebumps. The answer was default to no hai. Let's try and see what happens.
Interesting.
Let's try and see what happens. Nahi hoga to chhod denge. We have not made a formal commitment to anyone. The commitment is just to us to make as much as possible. So nahi hoga to chhod denge. And I think one step led to another. And I would in some ways call progress over perfection. Because instead of creating a perfect plan, instead of thinking ki nahi, I will do the best thing possible, only then will I contribute, or looking for that ideal opportunity, we just said, let's get our hands dirty, let's try. And some of it was definitely from prior experience of working on the field, whether it's a teacher in a fellow, etc. So some of those experiences helped and provided a safety zone, saying ki theek hai, nahi hoga to we will come back to our own lives. Nothing will have changed there. We still are privileged. We still will be privileged. And karke dekhte hain. And to my surprise, what was just so amazing and empowering to me was that when I reached out with a no expectation sort of help, I think the cause was such that nobody said no. If people said we can't devote time, they would say, I can connect you to someone, I can pay money, I can donate something, I can donate clothes, I can ferry people, I can go give food. So I don't think I still remember somebody turning down the offer completely.
There was no one who turned it down
That
completely.
was just so empowering because suddenly the focus was just moved out of, and it still I think is giving me goosebumps as I speak. It's sending chills down my spine just thinking about that moment. I have never experienced this before. I don't think I've ever gone out to people without any expectation. Neither have I seen this kind of phenomenal response from everyone I've reached out to. And if they couldn't contribute when I was asking them, they would make it a point to come back to me two weeks down the line, 2 days down the line, connect me to someone, figure out a way. Even if they are unable to contribute to the cause directly, they will say, "Can I help you build a platform? Can I do, say, voice calling training for your volunteers?" Something will definitely come in, and that was very empowering for me.
Yeah.
And from what you're saying, I'm reminded of a saying that the greatest act of courage is to ask for help. And in Take 2, we often, people who've been through it would remember that when they did their whole achievement, motivation, calibration, there was this whole factor of asking for help. And that's coming out alive for me, that how much we push others saying that, just go and ask, because you'll be surprised with how much the help is available. It's just our assumptions and imagination about rejection, about not getting what we want or hurting others, etc., that comes so much in the way. Of course, here there was a common cause, and
Mm.
that did that. But I think to us in Take 2 also, this has come alive so many times that when people go and ask their people around there in their lives, they often come back surprised. Say, I never thought that somebody will be available to me in such a solid way.
Um, the interviews I did, I can share. Like the beginning of the interviews was always, "Hi, I'm calling you from MTSN. We are setting this up. This is the main goal of the organization. Are you ready to give this much amount of time? Are you ready to learn what it takes? Because none of us are experts here." And I think most people came with the belief that they were going to be overwhelmed. They were going to be working to learn about their fellow citizens and just getting this experience. We actually did not have to motivate people um, that much. On the mental health side of things, I mean, for the motivation, I think what was important was we did have a lot of orientation meetings where we talked about how we came together, why we are doing what we are doing, what are the actual challenges, break them down into one simpler tasks. That was important, just to make sure that people are not getting overwhelmed all the time by not knowing where to start. Um, with the mental health support side of things, I don't. None of us are counselors. None of us are trained psychologists. But all of us have had experience in the equality and diversity sector for quite a long time. Um, we understood that this work gets overwhelming, but we didn't anticipate the amount of mental health support we would need. And I think everybody kind of understood that at the end of the day, we all have to support each other. People were calling each other mentors. I know that very strong bonds formed between the mentors. People called each other at the end of the day to talk about their frustrations. People called us at the end of the day to tell us like they also broke it down for us to help us help them. They told us, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem we are facing. They were volunteers crying at the end of the day because they could not take how much pain our fellow citizens were going through. And it was up to us to just be there for them. There was nothing more we could do. We were looking at bringing in counselors later if MTSN went on for a longer time. And we actually did not have to do that at the end of the day. But yeah, we were there for each other. We listened. Listening was the first thing. And we hoped that somebody else would listen to us. And there was always somebody that we could kind of talk these things out with.
Yeah. Mayank?
So I think for me, Sanjay was one of those people who I reached out to post, I think, getting off those stressful times, etc. But I think something that stood out for me, in addition to what Sonali said, were a couple of values very, very specifically. One was what I was talking earlier about, responding to Nagesh's questions around trust. There was a huge amount of trust in what we were trying to do, and trust in the fact that we all are trying to get to the same objective. Our ways could be different. How we are thinking about could be different. How we want to make it happen can be different, but we were very, very aligned on what we were trying to solve for or achieve or help. With that amount of trust, I think also comes vulnerability. We were very vulnerable to our teams, saying we don't have all the answers. We are trying to do the best possible things we can, but we are also open to feedback, open to learning. We don't know all the answers. We are trying it for the first time. We are trying our best, but we still don't know everything. Uh, what these two things did very automatically in some ways is built a collective ownership. And I would call it like a mesh. So for example, one thread together possibly cannot hold the ball falling down from the sky. But if it creates a mesh, it's the power of the collective. So if I was not feeling okay, I trusted the group saying, okay, I'm not okay today. I have something else to engage with, or I just need to cut off from this. And people just stood up and said, okay, if you are not okay, we will hold fort. This happened very often with me, Sonali, Ankush, a couple of our other colleagues were there, with mentors, with volunteers, with interns, and all of that. And I think there was a huge amount of trust. We also saw a couple of volunteers leave because they were unable to handle this, and they were honest about it.
Yeah.
I think I would add just one more thing to this one. In the beginning, all of us were doing quite a lot of the things together, but automatically we realized that, again, as Mayank said, we were all aligned to the same goal. So the whole point was not personality development for ourselves, but the whole point was like, how do we do this so that the job is, at the end of the day, lives are easier. And so we kind of decide, if we knew that somebody could do this thing much better than somebody else, they automatically took it, and other people just gave them the space to do that. We had like a physics colleague, physics junior from my ICER college days in the US. She has a lot of data analysis abilities, and she couldn't work during the daytime hours in India. So basically, she stayed up all night doing the data analysis to figure out where are we going wrong, where are our, and Mayank was supervising that. So the time zones, again, we divided up what work can be done according to your schedule so that you can still plug into it without having to always stay awake, all throughout the day. Now that was one example. Another example was somebody else was much better at like training volunteers. So they got taken up the job of like, okay, you train volunteers. Somebody else was much better at like team handling. And so they took up the job of like team handling for mentors. And yeah, again, we trusted each other quite a lot. So we were just like, yes, today I'm not in like, and everybody knew that most people were saying no only when they're at the end of their tatters of their mental health. So, it wasn't like, again, it was a trust scenario. So we knew that we were there and we were committed to kind of helping as much as possible. Now, in the beginning, there was no commitment. So as Mayank said, we could like progress a little bit at a time, and we'll see how it goes. But once we started getting the calls from the helpline, that became a real commitment, because then people were trusting on us. And so then all of us did everything we could to put out information in a timely manner, to make sure that as many cases are closed between a particular time. And so that took a lot of perseverance. And again, we did that all together. And I think I have to say, I've never seen a WhatsApp group of like 1,000 individuals, not having, morning forwards, or like not having any sort of other discussion except problem, solution, sent to other person if solution not found in the group. That was it. There was no, there was no banging of drums. There was no music. There was nothing. It was very, very efficient. It was very honest. Everyone was honest. Yeah.
You know,
And I think just adding to that, Sanjay, possibly
yeah,
here very quickly is now when I'm listening to Sonali speak, I'm going through my own thoughts. I somehow feel the universe also conspired, and I think things fell in place. Some of it definitely we tried to play together, but I think there was a power beyond us that just held us in all of this endeavor.
yeah, it's interesting how when we rise to the challenge, somehow others rise to it as well, and that's the wonder of change making. I also want to point out that three, four things that you're raising that we believe is very important for change makers. One is your resourcefulness. The whole example you gave of mobilizing somebody from the US using time zone is a resource, right? I mean, so it became a resource. Um, School children who would have thought of that, right? And they were anyway out of school, and they became resources to this such a challenge. You also talked about, one of the things we talked about change makers and an entrepreneurial mindset that comes is the whole thing of feedback. So, Mayank, what you said, to me, that's very, very important. That how uh, you were open to feedback and listening to each other. And by the way, entrepreneurs, if I may take them as a manifestation of the entrepreneurial mindset, great entrepreneurs are known to be very, very, they go and seek feedback actually. They not only like take it in, but they actually go to each stakeholder. I remember there's an startup that I used to mentor, and the founder used to say कि मैं तो जाके वो झाड़ू वाला होता है उससे भी पूछता हूँ भैया आपकी जिंदगी कैसी चल रही है right, and it was important for him to listen to the person who's serving them, because he said because he serves tea into to the people who have been working 18 hours a day, and if I don't take care of him, then so that's the other thing. And the third thing you said, goal being very clear. Yes, chain makers definitely relentlessly go after goals, like you said, very focused on problem solving. So I hear all those elements in here. uh,
Think there's one more element again which I would like to add. Again, like this is a process, right? We are also thinking, and it's coming out one by one. Um, One other thing is like I'm sure all of us are a little bit perfectionist when we try and do something, but in this case, it was also an education in a hands-off approach, in the sense that you trust people to do the job that you got them to do. We did not micromanage. There was no point because we also did not know much, and again we didn't want to. And I think it was hard at first for all of us. We were struggling to always be there. We were also struggling to figure out all the challenges, but we realized that we don't have to, because we get more people and we trust them to figure out one challenge at a time. And I think that gave people an ownership as well, because all of them were part of the whole thing. We tried not to make it any kind of a hierarchical dynamic, because then it becomes more about who's in charge of who, and that's not something that is beneficial to the cause. So yeah, so again, like I think micromanagement is something that kind of just brings down productivity quite a lot. And just trusting people to just be the best of themselves is an important part of that journey.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. How simple that sound, but the most difficult to do often, right? Trusting people to be with the best intentions. So you talked about how overwhelming it was. Sonali, did you like feel like giving up at any point of time?
Yeah, every day I think. And to be honest, I think like working 19 hours on a laptop every day, I have gotten nerve problems after that. And it's going to take like a year to, I think you probably come to a point where I can use my hands again properly. But again, I mean, these are all things that come with trying to do something, right? You don't think of all the challenges you're going to face. And I'm glad that we don't think of all the challenges that we are going to face, because if you think of like this can be the problem, this can be the problem, this can be the problem, then you're as good as giving up. So I went before the lockdown because I was worried about the health of certain family members, and I was there for 3 months and working remotely. So my job timing started after like 1 p.m. and it went on till 9 p.m. So we kind of made slots where each of us had to be there. So 3 hours each, um, around our schedules. And then over the other timings, we knew that somebody else is there to pick up the slack when we are not giving 100%. So if I'm in a work call or a meeting, then I'm not able to take another MTSN call. But I knew that Mayank was there or Ankush was there. And then we basically just set tasks for each of us. Like if we couldn't do something within a time period that we are in charge of, then we had a handover system. So this was also there with the other mentors as well. So we basically figured out that if people will leave, but when somebody is leaving, there will be a rip in that whole infrastructure. So we wanted to make sure that that rip did not affect again the end goal. So there was a complete handover process. So if you are in charge of a certain volunteers, you then basically get another mentor, get the volunteers hands on working with them for 1 or 2 days before you leave, give us a bit of a notice. Now this was not always possible because everyone was volunteers and everyone was going through their own problems, but to a large extent because people really believed in what they were doing and they understood the um, fallbacks, the side effects of just leaving, just taking off at a moment's notice. We again trusted them to do this handover system and it worked till a long point. Mayank, you're back, so take it on again.
Yeah, you were saying, Mank, when you dropped off about handling
Yeah.
work.
So I was saying for me, I think burnout did happen a lot many times, as Sonali was mentioning. So one I was saying was progress over perfection, and just saying, can I take the next step, and not thinking कि 500 सीढ़ियां चढ़नी है, I have to climb 500 steps. Just thinking, can I take the next step? And also in some ways being vulnerable and trusting the group, specifically the core group, and saying I may not be available.
Right.
I am going through this. I may not be able to take this up immediately. Can someone pitch in?
Yeah. One of the aspects that you both of you are bringing up from your experience is that for change makers, we say that how you cope with stress is very important piece, and I can hear how you did that in your own ways. Uh, it's all a little over an hour into our session today, and I would like the audience to engage with you. I'm sure they have many questions and things to offer as well. But before I go, I want to just bring this up, and this is a surprise question that I promised both of you. Mayank, you there? Yeah, you haven't dropped off yet. Okay. They say first you change the world and then it changes you. How do you think this experience changed you?
Who do you want to go first?
Any one of you.
I'll let Mayank go first.
I think for me, it just challenged a lot of my assumptions. And it gave me the confidence to try things out. It gave me an example to trust myself, to trust other people, to be vulnerable to them, just to experience some of these emotions and just being in that moment. And that was just very, very empowering. अभी ये करना है, नौकरी है, नहीं है, क्या है, all of that is secondary. This is the problem that I'm trying to solve for. How do I get it done?
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of things change on the personal front in the sense that I had a lot of experience setting up a lot of different groups, but this was something which was a complete different scale. And I was working with people who are doing very different kinds of things. So, but I think every day when we were doing this, I used to go through scores of news articles, scores of videos, just to learn more, so that to inform our decisions, to inform the structure of the group, and that just made me learn a lot about India. Um, and I think that's just something that that you need to keep informing yourself about. There was a lot of unlearning, definitely, but I think on the personal front, I've always been a very closed off person in the sense that I really trust people, but I often don't believe that people are gonna say yes when you're asking them. And I think just reaching back to a lot of people that I thought would be doing a good job at this, and them just saying yes even though we haven't talked in 10 years was really, really empowering, in the sense that, okay, people, these people connections actually mean something. Secondly, obviously, I was 19 hours on my laptop and just, crazily juggling stuff, and just depending on my partners, my partner, my sister, my parents, not to be available to them at many different times. And the way I coped with a lot of things was not speaking about all the things that was happening. I think I'm not a big like sharing person, because if I share, I felt like I might break down at that point. It was a lot about just go through it without thinking of the challenges. And I knew that, and after some point, I figured out I could do it. It's fine. At the end of the day, things happened. These are the tiny things we achieved today. So, as my mother used to say, just before you go to bed, you say, this tiny thing was achieved, tick mark. This tiny thing was achieved, tick mark. And again, I noticed that I could make myself go into a disciplined pattern of, having a 19-hour day where everything has been pretty hard. And yeah, I think the personal connections part is the best for me. Also, I made so many interesting connections. I mean, friends for life, friends, or people that you can just pick up the phone with and say, hey, I have an interesting idea and I want to talk about this particular problem. And they're not people who will say that, oh, you are a physicist, why are you trying to jump into this thing? It was more about people. You are a person. Don't define yourself into a particular profession or field or what your training has been in. All skills are transferable. You learn that when you're doing something of this sort. Every skill is transferable. And the second thing is, nothing goes to waste. Like, all the skills that you pick up in your life, every little skill, talking on the phone or talking in a different language, or saying hello in a nice way to someone just to make it seem a little bit easier to them, all of those skills come in handy. Yeah.
Thank you, both of you. I mean, getting goosebumps as you spoke right now. The How much faith and belief helps in this process. I think I am at least going away feeling faith in humanity, if I may call
This was the question back then. We were just, I think, thinking about who can possibly contribute, etc. And that is how it was happening. There was not a very structured thought process. But some of this, what you're saying now, makes, I think, puts me to spotlight saying, why couldn't I post it on the TAKE2 group?
I guess I didn't really know about TAKE2 back then, but I'm sure that like opportunities like this exist, all the time. And I guess for me, it was like, because I come from a very multi-disciplinary background, I guess I just reached out to normal people, just like, here, come join us, here, come join us, here, come join us. That was just what I did. And all from my networks who I thought that I could just depend on if I'm suddenly taking off. Yeah. And I'm sure that, Nagesh, like, next time, obviously, you will be on the forefront of things. And yeah, as Mayank said, it was not really a very structured process. Once we put together a few groups, after that, we were just extremely overwhelmed into where the ball was taking us on that path, rather than like, how do we actually figure out the path intentionally by ourselves.
Yeah, hopefully we won't get to into this kind of a situation one more time, but maybe a different situation. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me also add a perspective here, Nagesh. I'm kind of going back to Mayank's conversations that it started out by, because Mayank and I are often go to each other kind of people, being friends, and when we are going through something emotionally, so it started out that way, and I started listening to it, and I remember that at that point of time, I did offer a few connections, resources to Mayank at that point of time, but as he was saying, it was just a ball that it was like an avalanche, right? I mean, it was going so fast that for me, whether he has picked up what I offered or not didn't seem important. It just felt like saying, I trust him to do what is right. If he needs it, he will, let me know. So I did offer people resources or connections that I had, and sometimes got picked up, and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah.
Uh, and for me, then it became more about saying, look, looks like this is the meaningful role that I can perform in terms of holding him through the process. So I just made a
I'm
decision.
pretty sure we forgot quite a lot of like the messages that came our way, because it was quite a lot at that period of time, and it was also quite a challenge of like keeping everything parallelly in our heads at all times. And I think basically, like, because our goal was like, okay, these are the requests coming in, we pick them up as fast as possible, and any time we had left, or when we had like extra resources and we were struggling, then we basically just reached out to the first contact who messaged us at that point, because it seemed like, rather than make a call, if somebody is calling you, pull them in right now. It was just easier. Yeah.
I'd like to invite others for their reflections, questions.
Quite frankly, I was actually, out of both of yours vivid sharing, I was looking at the recap between March, April, and the velocity with what the whole thing was going about. And quite frankly, we have some 4 or 5 friends who took on this objective, but the looking at the scale where you have operated, we have identified who are wanting the support within our own community and own friends and circles. Those were stranded at some corner, those were a few numbers, but the scale where you have operated, and Mayank and Sonali, out of your vivid sharing, I was visualizing things right now happening here and now, and the way you have handled the situation. I was looking at, all I'll tell you, change, all those are nice words and the distinctions, but these are, the life is now in front of us and the challenge is to be dealt there itself. And really, hats off to you people, really. And my key learning from this is, one is empty promises. One second, choose to listen, no. If no comes, that's fine. Because you said by default it is no. If something comes up, that's bonus, right? And in bonus, life comes actually. Yeah. And but quite frankly, people say, read Gita, read Bible. Out of these listening, you have done a karma yoga. Yeah, it's selfless. What is there in return? Your own initiative, your own satisfaction, right?
I mean, I think, I think if anyone gets helped, then all of us get
Yeah,
helped at the end of the day, right? Like, it's like they say, you teach a
yeah,
woman and you basically raise a whole family, which is
yes,
educated.
yes,
So you help one person, that basically means that their whole family is,
yeah.
helped. So,
So people
and I
say,
mean, we
I'll
have
tell
all,
you, in what certain philosophers have taught that at the age of retirement, you will start worshipping God. You are worshipping God right now. Okay. So thank you very
I'll
much.
just take this. You brought up some very interesting thoughts, Himanshu. I just wanted to just bring up certain inspirations at that time that kept me going. I knew a lot of people, they were very, like, everyone. I knew a lot of groups basically who started doing similar kind of work. So, and individual levels, at family levels. My friend Devina from school and her mother, and her mother-in-law, they basically started a food, they made packets of food like every day, 200, 300 packets, and when migrant workers were coming in having to be quarantined, they just went and gave it to them. Like, they collected donations, but they didn't bank on them. They just basically said that we have a certain amount of money and we're just going to use it. Then there were, at that point, I was invited to be part of a group, Odisha Positive, on WhatsApp. So I'm from Odisha. And again, a lot of these people are based in different parts of the world. They're based in different parts of India, and they were talking about little bits about where they are situated, what they were doing on a daily basis. I know of a lady, she used to go and basically, do whatever she could on a daily basis, and at the end of the day she would say that this is what we need for tomorrow. And so I think all of these little stories in every scenario. And also, I would say that just when I went back to India during the lockdown, there's a lot of things to be learned from different communities around the world, I would say. And in England, particularly in Sussex as well as in Glasgow, there were a lot of volunteer communities that automatically came together as soon as the lockdown happened. They asked the questions of there will be lots of elderly people. Obviously, the privilege here is that elderly people have their own space, they're living on their own. But as soon as lockdown happened, they couldn't go out to get food, they couldn't go out to get deliveries, they were at a lot of risk. And people like us, they didn't ask for any money or anything. Everybody had groups, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. This was like usage of technology towards actually helping what needed to be done. They came together, they took slots on their own, and they basically took food from some place, delivered it to people's doorsteps. They asked people, you need help? Do you need books? Do you need letters written to you? Like, are you lonely? Yeah, there are different challenges at different communities. You just have to come together in that particular way. I don't think we can ever be trained to do certain kind of these kind of work. You just have to say, okay, this is the challenge, this is what you need, and let me try and do as much as I can. And I think I would like to just say that all that inspiration came from a lot of different sources. So we can't take credit for like doing all these things. We were all inspired by something or the other. We learned from places, we picked things up from so many other people who have done this before us.
But Sonali, one fact of life is always remains that, we all know many things, but, there is a big gap between knowing and doing. So you have implemented that, you have executed that to this scale, and, that is all the more what is on the table, and for which, all words of it. I would not say it's for appreciation. No, it's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement. You never seek any appreciation, right? Yeah, because, people who are self-motivated are appreciating and creating their own level of benchmark. So, that is creating and recreating their self in the inquiry of something which is much bigger. Okay, so thank you very much for that.
So I think just adding to what Sonali said here is one, definitely we got inspired in our own little ways and tried to act. I would just like to highlight this here, that this work, specifically the numbers that you see, the stories that you hear, has so many other people. We are in some ways one fortunate and two privileged to represent all of that work being done as ours. So we're just, I think, hogging a lot of limelight for a lot of effort that a lot of people put in.
Yeah.
And I think in hindsight, this seems like a big achievement. But I actually, when we were doing it, we were taking it at just as one step at a time. It was very overwhelming, but towards the end of the day, it was also very satisfying. So I don't know, personally for me, I did it for my own, say, satisfaction, for my own feeling that I'm using my privilege for something meaningful, etc. So I would take away the anchor from something outside, ki bahar kuch ho raha tha and there was something affecting, etc., etc. So saying I wanted to possibly nurture my emotions. I think tackle my guilt of privilege. Tackle saying ki why am I just sitting on a couch not doing anything? And I think I'm just bringing the focus a little bit more inward, saying I did possibly some of those things that might feel inspiring or some of those things. But for me, I think I was dealing with some of those emotions also internally. Just humanizing the entire process.
Yeah. And I would like to bring up more names over here because Ankush is not here. Ankush was I think probably the brainchild of this whole thing. He had the idea and he put
he was the
out that Google form.
As I say always.
Yeah. And we basically wrote in that Google form, called him up and were like, hey, what are you doing? And then we got jumped in. But again, people that I called up on the first day of doing this, and I would just like to say their names over and over again. If I knew all the names of 100 volunteers off the top of my head right now, I would say that. But I know a few names: Eman, Ravi, Komal, Simli, Maya. All of them just gave up their lives at that point and they jumped in. And I think it was just a collective effort of, तुम ये कर सकते हो, आप ये कर सकते हो, आप ये कर सकते हो, मैं ये नहीं कर सकती हूँ. Say a lot of acknowledging that I cannot do and I don't know the answers to it, as Mayank said. And all of those volunteers who basically trained themselves to do Excel on their phones. They trained themselves to man a helpline. They trained themselves to learn languages at some point, and they basically called up each other. Like somebody at Tamil Nadu is calling up somebody from Mumbai or Delhi and, saying that, hey, I have this migrant worker on the call and they are talking in this particular language, and they went through the sheet and said, oh, this particular person speaks this language, let me call them up. Right? 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds just rising up to the challenge, saying that hum karenge. Yeah, or kya? Yeah, we wouldn't have been like, we are just a drop in the ocean, and we just, I guess we dreamt, and then we basically made the ball rolling, and then all of these other people took up their own balls and they started rolling with it. So that's what happened. So I don't think there's not something that we thought we would actually achieve. It just happened.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that aspect in of 14, 15, they were 16, and Mayank, what you brought in of how other people rose to challenge. I think one of the myths that we try breaking in Take-Two a lot is that change makers are heroes. Not they are as human as any one of us here. And it's not that it comes across as, often we see the business heroes, so to say, right? And then that becomes like a stereotype of saying, yeah, this is the way, you have to be a Tesla, or you have to be a Mark Zuckerberg, and that's what is entrepreneurial mindset or change making. To me, I think for us, there are stories all over the place of change making that come from just people like us who are on the screen right now. And that's exactly why we could, Take-Two happened, and that's exactly why we are having this today, where we are saying, if there's anything that got created in this, is hopefully this ignition amongst all of us, saying we can also do this. Like I heard Nagesh say, Himanshu say, there may be regret for not having been part of it earlier, but hey, we can do it now. There's so many problems to be solved in this country.
Yeah, I mean, like with MTSN as well, we were thinking by the end of it, like when things, requests started getting a little less, or the process got a bit more streamlined, and we started thinking, what is the next stage? Because there's so many things that are left to be done. Now, most of us were burnt out by the end of that whole process. So we couldn't, at that point, we decided that it's best not to jump in and start like a whole new thing. But we did have a few calls of brainstorming ideas on basically how do you prevent such a situation happening, right? How do you prevent people feeling helpless? Feeling helpless is the worst feeling in the world, because you feel like all agency has been taken away from you. You don't feel safe, and you don't know where to look for. Another thing, we found out that it's a huge country. There will be lots of like process failures just because of the sheer number of people we are working with, just because of the sheer scale. And yeah, thank you, Srilata. Yeah. So I was saying that, there are so many different challenges. I would just like to highlight a few of the challenges very specifically. Like in the very beginning, there were lots of directives on different state level websites, state government websites. Now, a lot of them were in English. And again, we are a people of more than 1,000 languages, and some of which are dying out, but we have 30 official languages, but not everyone speaks all of those languages. So one of the things was, how do we put people on the phone so that they translate a certain thing and help people just fill in the forms, because it might seem like a very small thing to do at that point. You won't feel like I'm doing something great. You're just filling up a form. But that is what made the difference between them taking a train or not taking a train, and them having food for 2 days or not having food for 2 days. That was one small thing. Like filling up a form is a skill that all of us have, like educated people at least, and we can do that without feeling like we are a hero, but that's necessary. Now, second thing was just we realized that people don't have internet access, right? Like to fill up the forms. They also don't have money on their phones to make a phone call when they needed to make a phone call to us. So a lot of that was, we decided, okay, how much funding can we, so like 20 rupees, you put a top up of 20 rupees or 30 rupees on people's cell phones. And that made a difference of whether they can make a call to ask for help or not make a call to ask for help, right? Then there were other challenges like pregnant women not having enough nutritious food, which other groups were tackling. And so sometimes when we got certain requests, we directed towards the people who could do them better than we could. There were people, again, there were so many people getting unsafe, right? They didn't have shelter. They went to the train station. They thought there was a train that was going to go. The train got cancelled. The police did not help them out at that point. Other times they did, but then they were extremely frustrated because that journey happened a few times already for people. And they did not have money to spend on these journeys. They did not have the privilege of time at that point to take their children, to take pura bora basti utha ke jao. Delhi, matlab, you come from some remote parts in Delhi and then you come to the main station, 2 hours, make that journey, and then you have nowhere to stay the night because you have to wait for another train the next morning. Then the point was, how do we make a digital map of all the different places that we know people are providing shelter? And so that we kind of like can go to the map, click it on, call these people, and ask them whether you have capacity to take on a few more people for shelter in the night. So when we actually went into the process, we learned that it was simple, tiny things that actually mattered at the end of the day. It was not something that MTSN became like is trying to do a great thing. It's just MTSN was trying to make a top up of 30 rupees at the end of the day. MTSN was trying to book a cab and ask a cab company. MTSN was just trying to say कि आपके पास और एक packet food है क्या? So at the end of the day, these are very, very, very small things that got, that helped us, all the people coming together. Yeah. And like I know that a lot of friends were like, basically they didn't know anything about making PPE kits and all. They started making PPE kits on their own. Learned the process, started doing that. So it was a lot of just recognizing that people have talent, people have potential, and even tiny skills like phone filling up basically saves a life.
What you brought alive just now, Sonali, for me is that while you were focused on the base of the Maslow's hierarchy for others, you ended up doing what was right at the top of it. Any other questions, reflections anybody else has? Or I can see some of us have left, so I thought we could then otherwise bring it to a close. Okay. Yeah, so just before everybody leaves, it'll be really nice if you could, just an offering back to Mayank and Sonali to thank them. Just if you could put in the chat window, what are you leaving with? Any thoughts and feelings that you're leaving with, so that we can let them know what their speaking today has created for all of us.
Yes, I want to say another thing which I just realized now as well.
Sure.
The main challenge, I think I realize now for me, was not doing all these things. The main challenge was when I was plugged into social media. And obviously, I was feeling strongly at that point. I was sharing the plight of people. And people wrote back to me saying that, आप ये सब negativity share मत करिए. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of backlash when I said, dude, please think about empathy. Like, when you're using social media to ask government officials to, okay, come on, don't make the lockdown here, kyunki, you're trying to weigh up these things. I'm a researcher. I do, research on a daily basis, and, research is a transferable skill. You kind of apply that to see what will actually help save more lives versus what will not. When you're doing certain things, are you selecting for a particular class of people? Like, are you selecting to help only middle class, rich people, or are you also selecting the mass of the country to help? Now that came with a lot of backlash. That anything, like, I am very outspoken about feminist queer things. I have a magazine on queer feminist things, so I'm used to getting backlash. But just getting backlash for saying that empathy is the most important thing at this point was not a good feeling. Like, I didn't realize that people are going to object to empathy, calling for empathy. People said empathy आपको सेव नहीं करेगी, medicine सेव करेगी. Like, भाई मैं researcher हूँ, मुझे पता है medicine सेव करती है life को. But I'm asking for empathy. I'm asking for people to help. Now, all the people I personally reached out to, I knew they are not going to react that way, and that's why they all jumped in feet first. But a lot of the backlash came every day from social media, from people that I thought are my friends, close friend circles, and those connections got broken up at that point because I decided to kind of take a step back. So I think, yeah, that needed a lot of perseverance to go through the day, knowing that some of my closest friends who I thought were like close do not believe in the plight of like normal people. Some people say unko itna khana kyun chahiye? And it was just tasteless to, hear those things. So I think many challenges that if you're doing anything that helps people or you're trying to mobilize things, you are going to face a lot of questions and backlash. And I think those are the most mentally affecting things that you would have to push through. I just didn't want to go away without saying that, because that did take a lot of toll on me at that point.
Yeah, but that's very true. Actually, the time of pandemic has taught many lessons, and this is a very, very big lesson learned out of that time. Because in the time of pandemic, we could really see the real self of some people. Those were never visible to us in normal routine time. And actually, quite frankly, those were the time that we could see people without any mask. Yeah, so yeah, really, yeah, I acknowledge that. And
Yeah, I
actually,
mean, a lot of people also go
yeah.
through that shit, so I wouldn't judge them at that point, but
No, it is
I
no, it
would
is
say
beyond
that it is
it is beyond
definitely a challenge to
judgmental.
navigate that.
It is beyond judgmental, because till the time you did not really do not deal with the real self, who they are or who I am. I mean, that is a profound inquiry of human being, who he is or who he is not. And this time has given a clear picture of who the one is and who he is not. Really, I acknowledge.
So
Yeah,
I
but
will,
I think if I did actually call them up, they might have said a different thing
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
social media emotions run high all the time.
Yes, yes.
So
so I just invite. I can see some comments have started coming in the chat window. If you could just read and also just put in your two bits on it. That how has it affected you? What are you taking away?
Yeah, I like to thank Sonali, Mayank, Sanjay, Linda, yeah, and for bringing both of you together to share the story, and it is profound and it deeply touched. And I'm asking myself, what can you do as an individual?
Thank you for me. Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity to share, Sanjay. And I think gratitude for everyone for listening in. It brought me again in touch with what energizes me. Going through that story, walking down that memory lane, thinking about what we did, how we did it, etc. It just, I think, gives me goosebumps and also makes me aware of what energizes me as an individual.
yeah, I would like to also just, thank everyone for having us here and listening to us ramble on about things. But it was also a learning experience for us just to go down memory lane, think about what actually worked, what did not work, because I don't think we ever actually gave time to do that to ourselves. Yeah, and I have formed lasting connections with Mayank and Ankush and my team, and I know whom to go to. Like, and all of you people are now my connections as well. So I'm privileged to have you in that network. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much, Sanjay, for inviting us.
Thank you, both of you. And I am missing Ankush right now. I wish he was here too. We would have had one more perspective. I'm sure a very rich one, given that he was the progenitor of this. And so we'll thank him in absentia. And Ankush, we are missing you all here. You will see the recording hopefully. And I'm just going away very, very grateful also for the fact that I always think knowledge gets created through conversations. So I think a lot of new knowledge got created for all of us today. So thank you for that. We will share the recording with all of you, and please do just go to it if you need to, and please keep joining Connect's platform. Thank you.